It's the most important year of your life. At least this video from Big Think and Free Think says so. And they're not talking about 80-year cycles like we do, the fourth turning. This guy's talking about 80-year cycles in technological advancement. However, he does talk about how this leads to conflict and crisis. And there is an argument to be made that Donald Trump will not win. The right will not win. And I help you understand what that means. Now, I'm not entirely convinced. Just because in the past, progressive movements, leftist movements, and communists have been victorious doesn't mean the right always loses. It matters what we do here to protect the systems that we think are important. You're here. That's what it says. As we're here, the old system and the new system are converging, and the new system is taking over. Now, what does that ultimately mean for everybody? I'm going to play some of this video, not the whole thing, but I'll react to it because there's some things to be said. Well, this man is largely talking about technological advancements. I'd like to add the political narrative alongside his video. Roll tape. And unmute.
We are at a moment here in 2025 where we have world historic, game-changing technologies now starting to scale. But America and the world itself are going through huge contortions. And there's been 3 previous junctures where Americans have found themselves in this exact place. And the key piece of this is tipping points. When do you go from the slow build of a thing that's kind of clunky and not really working, do you all of a sudden get an iPhone that goes, holy shit, this is the most amazing thing in the world, and then everybody needs them. And what I'm trying to tell you now is we are in the middle of 3 tipping points that are world historic changes that are happening around us.
Indeed. And they do converge. Artificial intelligence, clean energy, and bioengineering. Of course, we see the transhumanists. You've got a combination with artificial intelligence and bioengineering. Bioengineering, of course, referring to there's a lot of gene technology. There are people who are injecting themselves with gene-altering formulas or whatever you want to call it, gene therapies, that inhibits the production of fat and produces muscle, which they say will make them live longer. And they say, we don't need fat. We're in an abundant society. Artificial intelligence, you all already understand, but you also have Neuralink, which combines the two. Networking AI into the human body. Clean energy is particularly fascinating, and that is the advent of fusion, which has been accelerating rapidly. It's not so much that it's clean energy, it's a stupid way to say, but energy efficiency. If fusion becomes ubiquitous, our energy production will be insane. Let's watch some more.
I'm Pete Leiden. I've basically been following the story of technology and its evolution and looking ahead into how it's going to change the world over the next 25 years.
And again, I'd like to stress, I'd like to add I'm going to skip over whatever this, introductory thing is. You guys can watch, if you want to watch the full video, watch the full video uninterrupted. I'm here to talk about the political elements. He's talking about technological.
Now, those of us who are in technology and those of us who have been immersed in it, which I have been for most of my career now, can see clearly these kind of incremental stages of these new technologies, that all successful new technologies go through a technology adoption curve. Let's say like Uber, the idea like, oh my God, instead of a taxi, it's all on your phone. And then all of a sudden, when enough people show how amazing it is, boom, the entire crew moves over. And the old system of the taxi system is gone.
I just need to stress, however, he's describing the adoption of literally anything, even cultural practices, political ideas, literally anything. Saying it's a technological adoption curve is reductive. Everything has an adoption curve. In fact, the idea of liberty had an adoption curve. Most people in the United States didn't agree with the idea of being free from a king and the system of government with lords. And then slowly over time, there was a growth rate among people who the Sons of Liberty and the Continental Congress and regular, Americans in the colonies were saying, we are our own country. It took time.
So you're watching an old system being essentially dismantled or having to come down at the same time as we're taking off on these new technologies to build the next systems.
And it's not just about technology. That's my point.
We're in the middle of that. Right now is smack in the middle of that. And
He is incorrect. There is no middle of, end of. All systems are amorphous. Maybe I'm being a bit reductive here, but the point he's making is that an old system is dying, a new system is growing, but there is no singular system. Technological advancement, transhumanism, AI, bioengineering, politics, liberty, communism, whatever you want to call it, all of these systems are in flux against each other. The way he's describing it predicts that the old system will collapse. It won't necessarily, but let's get political. Let's watch.
Our era, but we've also seen this in American history before. There's been 3 previous junctures where Americans have found themselves in this exact place. Now, that's not to say it's common. Like, this is 80 years ago, the last time we saw this. And they tend to come in these 80-year cycles. But what's amazing about these things is they have bursts of unbelievably widespread innovation that lasts for 25 years. The last big one was coming off World War II, 1945. 80 years ago, America was on a very similar parallels. We basically were watching the essentially dismantling of the old world that had been working pretty well, the economy and societies of the West. And then there'd been a crash, and you run into the Great Depression of the 1930s. Now, what that was the old system of running the economy just wasn't working. And so what happens is you watch these junctures in American society, we get super polarized. For example, there was an America First movement in the 30s. Communists. We were on the verge of violent conflict in America. And then you had the FDR and the kind of New Deal coalition that came out of the Depression, and they started to get traction. But anyhow, we had to resolve this political tension in America. And frankly, it had to do it in the world because the world also is going through this juncture. And so from
World War II, World War I. Well, this is World War II, mind you.
1945 to 1970, we watched the great post-war boom. Many people call it the high point of global capitalism. And you built this crazy economy where you did many things that were completely different than the previous era. Tax the rich at 90%. You watched incredible investment in public infrastructure like the interstate highway system and building suburbs. You basically watched the GI Bill and education, building institutions for higher education, expanding it for the boomers. That all happened in 25 years. The Great Society, the whole thing, 25 years. And then we ran in the 70s. It started kind of getting along in the tooth, stagflation.
Now, what he doesn't point out is that the reason the U.S. economy was so rapidly expansive was because we decimated the other industrial strongholds. With Europe being in disarray and desperate, it's actually how they got the national health system because the war left everything just flattened. They needed help. And Japan also. So great areas of industry had been decimated, and the U.S. was the unipolar power. We created the liberal economic order where we said, you buy from us or else. And oh boy, did we live like kings because we won the war. That's it. So when he talks about all these great policies and how great everything was, he's ignoring the fact that it came through death, destruction, and conquest.
Oil shocks. But here's the point. Old system had to come down, super conflict around it, and ultimately the building of a thing that was dramatically different than before. We've been through that before. And funny enough, like I say, if you go another 80 years back, we did it again.
The Gilded Age.
It's 1865. What is 1865? It's the end of the American Civil War.
Indeed.
Now, this is a good example of how passions run very high and political conflict is extreme at these junctures. In the Civil War, it was the most extreme. I mean, we literally had to have 750,000 Americans die in the Civil War.
Well, had to.
America, since the founding, had been in tension with these two economic systems. One was essentially a system of the early manufacturing economy where you needed free labor in the North. But in the old South, we basically had slavery.
Yep.
And they said, no, we're not going there. We're not going to give it up. We're not going to let go of this old system. We're going to fight to the death on the thing. And so this is a great point, actually, because what effectively happens, you have southern states reliant to a great degree on slavery. Not completely. Only a small percentage of people actually own slave. It's like 3%. But this is the structure of their economy, a large portion. So the North said, we live in a different way from you. We are more industrialized, and we don't rely as now. To be fair, they did buy a lot of products from the South that were rooted in slavery. The North had slaves too, but slowly started getting rid of them. Delaware and Maryland, for instance, were slave states.
They start getting rid of this, but the economy of the South, largely because of the cotton gin, or I'd say partly because of the cotton gin, slavery is entrenched. So when the North says, we are going to, in a very short period of time, shut down your economy, these states said, no, we're leaving.
This is a good example. Anyone rooted in the old systems that are going down are passionately want to defend that at all costs. Now, the thing that people do not know about the Civil War, I don't really remember as much about the Civil War, is the Civil War after 1865 had an unbelievable explosion of progress. That lasted for, what do you know, 25 years. For example, the Homestead Act, which is you gave anybody who went out west 150 acres for free. There was also land grant universities. All these little states started building institutes of higher education to educate average people, but also to be pushing scientific understanding of agriculture. But here's the other progress that was going on. It was technology. It was only after the war that America blew out like 175,000 miles of rail and essentially stitched the entire continent together with this steel-based rails. And essentially we reinvented America in 25 years.
So I'm going to now make the case, two cases. One, Donald Trump is going to win. The conservatives are going to win. I say Trump, but I really mean the right in this country, because I believe that this represents the new system. And the Democrats will lose because they represent the old system. And I believe there's a possibility, based on this man's assessment, we may be moving towards the end of the old system rapidly without need for great scale conflict. Now, he talks about these 80-year cycles, and there's actually another one we call Strauss-Howe generational theory. This says that every 80 years is a conflict. Now, he does point this out as he mentions the Civil War and the World Wars. And then he talks about the next phase, which is post-war industrialization or economic expansion. I posit this, my friends. There are two worldviews as to how this will play out. The left views the right, conservatives and Trump, as the old system. The constitutional republic certainly is the old system of this country. And they are trying to create a multicultural democracy. It's cult-like, it's ideologically rigid. It is a heavy monoculture on the left. The right has disparate ideologies, debates each other, and has diversity of thought. I know the left gets offended by that concept, and they try to make excuses as to why that's not really the case, but it is. Now, there's a couple ways to look at it, as I mentioned. One is that the right, the system of a constitutional republic, is largely rooted in old ideas. And therefore, it is the system on the way out being attacked by wokeness, this new emergent philosophy and worldview that is spreading across Europe and the United States. And we will see a great conflict period, maybe we're in it, that results in some kind of reconstruction where the right is crushed and defeated. I don't actually think so. That certainly is the leftist view. They say they're woke. And they're trying to fight old white supremacy. They're tearing down old symbols. And no, I actually have an argument against that. Donald Trump and the right actually represent a new system. They represent a coalition between left ideas in this country and the right ideas from 30 years ago. Because of the left being at odds, the right is now coalescing of the liberal and the conservatives of this country under a new system that seeks to protect the United States, its nation, its values, and otherwise. Now, you may say, but Tim, isn't that the old system? No. The liberal economic order is the old system. The system was born, just like this man says, around 80 years ago. The liberal economic order was born out of World War II, where powerful people came together and said, we will be the world police. We will create the International Monetary Fund, the SWIFT payment system. Like Hillary Clinton said, we came, we saw, he died. And the reason I believe this is correct, wokeness is just a tool of the liberal economic order to maintain the old dying system. It's why they want us to be involved in war in Israel, with Israel. It's why they want us to be involved in war in the Middle East in general and supporting Ukraine. Because the United States is it's the truncheon of the global economic order. They call this quite literally the liberal economic order. Well, Hillary and her ilk represented that, and they've lost. Trump represents something new emerging. I believe this new system will likely defeat and is defeating. With the indictments against these agents of the liberal economic order, you can see what's happening. I mean, take a look. You get Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, accusing Trump of being a traitor, desperately fighting to stop a new system from emerging. And what is that new system? Populism. The United States didn't have it. After the wars, you had U.S. world police. For 80 years, we've lived in the system of the liberal economic order. And now it's dying. Struggling to maintain its weird wars overseas, a population that is tired of these conflicts and looking for new means to sustain an economy. The liberal economic order for the past 80 years sustained the U.S. economy through the petrodollar. There is a new economic system emerging that says this doesn't work anymore. But maybe I'm wrong. That's why I argue this myopic view of there's an old system and a new system could be wrong. There are systems in competition all the time. Some die, some grow. Some return, some don't. Let's play more.
And here's the even crazier thing, though. You go back another 80 years, we did it again.
Indeed.
1787 to about 1810, 1815, we had created what is America. One way to understand what was happening in America at that time was it was part of a bigger part of Western Europe, in particular an extension of Britain, which was going through the Enlightenment at the time. The Enlightenment is essentially a fundamental system change from a feudal society kind of dominated by the Catholic Church and all that kind of stuff into essentially what we would now consider the modern world. And they invented 6 huge things that we still are working within today. Now, the reason I'm kind of...
Let's, he mentioned these 6 things. He says...
Invented 6 huge things.
This is kind of stupid. Mechanical engines, carbon engines, the Industrial Revolution, financial capitalism, representative democracy, and nation states. Yeah, come on, but these things overlap with each other. Nation states and representative democracy, largely the same thing. The Industrial Revolution and engines themselves are largely the same thing, so come on.
That we still are working within today. Now, the reason I'm kind of saying that is that had world historic implications. That was a building of a civilization that we essentially invented, we humans, but we Western Europe, in basically a space of 120 years. The forward motion of innovation, essentially from the West, was coming with those crazy-ass Americans who had this wide open continent to spread it to. And that is what America's role has been vis-a-vis the West in every one of those epochs. I'm arguing we have one more crank at that wheel with the arrival of 3 world historic changes that are happening.
But notice what he just said, and this is why I thought this was interesting to highlight. It was American greatness and expansionism at the end of every one of these epochs that he's describing. Does that sound indicative of a woke success or the liberal economic order? It doesn't. Donald Trump, Make America Great Again, reflects more what he has described, in my opinion.
Around its big. And the most obvious one is the arrival of artificial intelligence.
Now, this is crazy.
Chat GPT. Maybe you've heard of it. If you haven't, then get ready, because this promises to be the viral sensation that could completely reset how we do things.
I got to tell you guys how insane AI is getting. I'm going to pull up a video I made. The video generation is insanity. And we are a year. Let me put it like this. I'm going to show you this one video that's ridiculous. It's meant to be intentionally silly. This is Ian Crossland. Let's I hope you enjoy this.
Hey, can I help you? Yeah.
For those that may just be listening, Ian Crossland knocks on the door. An old man answers and says, "Can I help you?" And Ian says yes, before blasting him in the face with fire hose water from his own mouth. But let me see if I can pull up another tweet that actually I think I may have posted this on X as well to show you just how insane AI has gotten and where we're going to be. So this next one's not as ridiculous. This next one's actually, in my opinion, very, very cool. So let me play this video for you guys. Check this out. It is also starring Ian.
The veil is thin. They claw their way back.
They're coming out of the ground. Ghouls feed on flesh, ghosts on fear.
You can't kill a ghost!
But you can send it screaming.
Then I'll starve them both.
Stay down! Keep moving! Run!
This October, the The veil is thin.
It is a fake trailer for a movie called Ghouls and Ghosts,
Claw their way
starring Ian Crossland, AI generated in a matter of minutes. With this trailer being generated, take a look at some of the special effects. We'll zoom forward. You've got the ghost bursting through the door. It's incredible. The audio, when Ian yells, "You can't kill a ghost," listen.
You can't kill a ghost!
It got the room reverb correct. That freaked me out. Many people probably don't notice these things. Take a look at the detail on this ghoul face. I'm telling y'all right now, the point is, we are already
Arrival of generative AI.
We are already at a point where Sora 2, OpenAI's video generation, can make a feature-length film. Now, it'll probably take a couple of days to render it, for sure. And the reason why they don't allow you, the user, to do it is because there's too many people, so 15 seconds is the max. However, you can storyboard. Ian has actually made like a 2-minute long short film, and there have been people who have already made movies that are about 3 or 4 minutes long. It does take a long time because you have to manually do it, but at OpenAI internally and Google, they can probably go in, type it out and say, just make it and let it run. Now, it's not perfect, but based on that trailer, I know you already know this, that trailer was insane, and not the only one. They could render a full movie. This will destroy the old system. Hollywood's gone.
AI. With the arrival of ChatGPT 3.5 in November of 2022, I think we're going to see that as a world historic moment. I think people will look back on that is the starting gun of what will be understood as the age of AI. And I use age in a very explicit way, which is when you talk about a different age that humans enter, like, oh, the humans, entered the Bronze Age or the Iron Age. I mean, you're talking about essentially a fundamental game-changing technology, a breakthrough, a step change in our abilities, that once you cross that threshold, you don't go back. We're going to watch an explosion of amplification. The amplification of our mental powers with digital computers and now AI are going to be very similar to the amplification of our physical powers that mechanical engines, initially by steam, created the prosperity and wealth of the world that we know now, where we're just going to say, holy shit, we had no idea this is the world we're in.
Now, what he misses, and I'm sorry to say, the Industrial Revolution did do profound things. Technology did advance, but we also became substantially weaker. And I believe that there is going to be a threshold by which humans can become too weak and can't sustain systems anymore. Pre-industrial revolution, everybody, well, they were more fit. Not everybody was fit. Some people were wealthy and fat as well. The average family had one cow. They had a cow. And they'd get milk from that cow because cows make a lot of milk. And they worked on farms. Your life was very much the same as your grandfather's life and the same as his grandfather's life. And for hundreds of years, it was the same. In fact, the musket didn't get any significant developments for hundreds of years. Isn't that crazy? I can't believe it took them hundreds of years to figure out how to make a cartridge. And I'm not talking about brass. I'm talking about paper. The initial breech-loading muskets, or I should say rifles they had, they loaded they put the bullet, they took a piece of paper, bullet, charge, and then they twisted up the paper. And you could breech load, meaning it's like a brake barrel. You'd slide it in and close it. For hundreds of years, they were muzzle loading their guns. That's wild. The Industrial Revolution happens. Technology rapidly advances. However, we have become substantially more weak. We are more emotionally fragile, more envious, more angry. All of the vices amplified in a dangerous way. AI, I believe, will do the exact same thing. We will no longer be able to think for ourselves. We're already having a problem where people can't lift for themselves. They can't do physical activities. They're fat. That people are overweight, lazy, and incompetent. Take away their brain power. I predict something dark.
This is the first time we have an energy source that is a technology. 100% a technology.
Don't be stupid.
Not a commodity. We don't have to dig it up
do it.
as coal. We don't have to tap into it as oil. Why is that important? Because once it's a technology,
what's he talking
you can
about?
Consistently drop.
If he's talking about solar, because they showed solar, this man is not very smart. If he's talking about fusion, let's see.
Drive down the cost. And there's a kind of a rule of thumb in manufacturing, which if you double the number of producing.
He's talking about solar. Solar power, my friends, is about getting energy into places where it's hard to deliver fossil fuel energy. There's something called energy returned on energy invested, ERO, EROEI. And that is how much energy is put into extracting versus how much do you get from it. Oil is pretty good, but nuclear is the best. I don't know that he said solar, but they're showing solar, and now they're talking about solar, and solar is not good. I know he swore already, but it's not good. Solar is effective in, you invest a ton of energy into solar panels, photovoltaic cells, that when a photon hits it, it knocks an electron, creating a current. This allows you to capture energy in areas that it's difficult to bring energy to. However, solar has a terrible energy return on energy investment. It's more like a battery than anything else. We invest a ton of energy, produce solar systems, put them in the middle of nowhere, and we can generate energy in an area where we typically have a difficult time delivering energy to. Same is true for wind. The energy return on energy invested in some instances could be negative. Now, solar is dramatically improving as our industrialization of solar expands, but the real advent is fusion technology. We have reached fusion ignition, which is fusing atoms together, particles. And the energy released is tremendous. The problem we are seeking to overcome now is how do you extract that energy in some meaningful way? It's actually quite fascinating because typically what we do is we heat water. In nuclear energy, we boil water. Coal energy, we boil water. In fact, most solar, or I should say the most effective solar, boiling water, not photovoltaic. We aim mirrors at giant saltwater vats, boiling the water, which creates pressure in an internalized system. We direct that pressure energy out a singular, you get it, a valve. That pressure directed in a single direction will spin a turbine. That is, copper coils around magnets, which generate a current and electromagnetic field. We can then, with that current, power things. Solar, not so good.
Solar panels, you will come up with about 20% of a drop in cost. And this is the point. It's going to keep getting cheaper. And the same thing, flipping around to the same thing with electric cars. People think, well, electric cars are still expensive and whatever. You're not thinking this through because battery technology is the same thing. That's in lithium batteries. We're now getting whole other generations of batteries like solid.
Okay, brother, I love you, man, because you're spot on with so much, but he's talking about industrial shift, not advancement. So we can say that solar is getting cheaper because it's being produced more. It's more easy to produce. That doesn't mean it's going to be the best energy return on energy investment. Nuclear is still better. And fusion is better than that. Now, he's talking about solid state batteries. Indeed, one of the challenges with these green energies like solar, wind, etc., is storing that energy. When the wind stops, the wind is gone. At night, you don't have solar power. So you need different kinds of batteries. One of the most ingenious batteries is actually called an air battery. The way it works is that throughout the day, as excess electricity is generated, it powers a condenser which compresses air in an extremely highly pressurized system. So at night, what happens? The pressure is slowly released, which spins a turbine generating electricity. Now, that's a physical battery using actual physics, pressure, compression. We now have the advent of solid-state batteries. Typically, batteries have been in some kind of liquid medium or involving some kind of more malleable system. Solid-state batteries allow for a much higher energy density. So, anode, cathode, electrons jump from one side, creating a current. That's basically how it operates. We can charge it by reversing that by plugging it in. We also have graphene ion batteries, which is actually rather interesting, which puts a graphene lattice, I can already hear Ian cheering, through a lithium ion battery or other battery, which makes the charge, how do I describe this, even across the whole system, so it charges much, much more quickly. But, again, I'm going to stress, fusion technology is where we're going.
State batteries that essentially will be a next generation. But the point is, the forward motion of costs coming down on clean energies is just beginning. And when that happens, you're going to have what? Abundant, clean energy.
Photovoltaic cells require petrochemicals. They will not get us off of this system. And unfortunately, basically everything is still rooted in the requirement for some kind of fossil fuel. That means we will always need oil, coal, wood, or otherwise. Carbon is always going to be a principal source of energy for us because we need it as the ignition point to create all these other great technologies. Bioengineering is probably the scariest.
Basically, right around the time that we essentially had our earliest breakthroughs on generative AI, which is about 15 years ago, we also had the big breakthrough in what they call CRISPR, which is we figured out a way to cheaply and easily edit the genome of any living thing. And you just take one example. We now know how to take a cell, put it in a vat, and you can give it the same amino acids and the same kind of nutrients and the same things that a cow roaming around a field for like years chewing on grass would get those same nutrients, those same amino acids, and essentially would produce in their muscles the meat. That same thing can happen in a vat to actually grow the same cow cell into actual meat. Not like kind of meat, not like plant-based meat that's kind of like meat. It's meat. It's the same cell. It tastes exactly the same.
It doesn't, because the taste of the meat has a lot to do with the chemicals, the fats, salt content, etc. To be fair, I mean, salt isn't as big of an issue, but lab-grown meat is not yet there. But he is right. It will be there. Now, let's put these things together, and I'll wrap it up here. I know we played a lot of his video. I hate doing that, but I think the commentary is extremely important. These three things he's identified, clean energy, artificial intelligence, and bioengineering, do not predict the expansion and success of humanity. It predicts the destruction of humanity. If you take a look at the Industrial Revolution, we can see that they said, listen, these machines can do a lot more of the labor, freeing up more of our time. Well, that's actually quite simple. It meant that people had more free time for research and development. But these three things he's identified, these are not freeing up our time and making things better. Artificial intelligence will weaken our mind. It's already happening. School teachers are creating curriculum with ChatGPT. The students are then doing the homework with ChatGPT, and the teacher is then grading it with ChatGPT, and the kids are all doing swimmingly, but they are dumb as a box of rocks. And you can see this over and over again. Teachers talk about this phenomenon. Clean energy. This is minimal and perhaps not even impactful at all. But the one thing I could say does have the potential to free up more time would be fusion energy, which is a massive expansion on what we call energy return on energy invested, meaning a lot easier to get a lot more energy. Costs will go way down. Now that, I think, is still good in freeing up time for humans, and that more indicative of industrial revolution in my opinion. But bioengineering and artificial intelligence, our minds will turn to jello, and then we will destroy the natural world for which we are a part of and require. Now, I don't know that this will be the apocalypse. He may actually be correct, and what happens is these new technologies cause a tumultuous period of death and collapse, and those that cannot adapt to it die. The question then in the end is the political. Who survives this and why? I believe it will likely be more so conservatives. There's an argument for why the left will, because you may argue that wokeness is the emergent system displacing the old one. But I don't think so. The conservative system is that which is more resilient to artificial intelligence, more resilient to bioengineering. People on the right will not enter the Neuralink matrix to masturbate 24/7 like these liberals will. They will maintain a semblance of a connection to reality. They will still be able to work and think despite the advance of these technologies. Those who succumb to it, they become fat, overweight, they die. The people who couldn't survive the Industrial Revolution got fat from the free time, and they had heart attacks and got cancers and died. On the right, they exercise still. Why? They choose to. Despite the fact that machines have displaced beasts of burden and human requirements for labor, there are still people who decide they will exercise to maintain that requirement. With the advent of artificial intelligence, once again, we see people falling susceptible to it, but on the right, they resist and they reject. Bioengineering, once again, they will not succumb to these things. So while this technology expands, there are those of conservative values who show resilience to the advancements, willing to adopt and utilize them. Conservatives use factories the same as liberals, but conservatives have replaced the work requirement with physical exercise. Bioengineering will do tremendous things, and conservatives will not stop consuming natural foods and being healthy But they will adapt to this system where it makes sense. Factories to produce these foods and the MAGA movement, cutting out the plastics and the bad. I believe that when you take a look at the right, you can see the path is towards success. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for hanging out for the Tim Pool Show. Subscribe, share the show with all your friends. Join the Discord server at timcast.com. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Or on my other channels, Talk News.